Welcome to the 4D Combatives Firearms and Defense Network in Tampa, Florida, with hosts Lane Andrews and Nick DiMatteo. On this podcast, we discuss firearms-related topics, including legal, tactical, concealed carry, as well as weapon and product reviews. We also discuss self-defense training as it relates to concealed carry. Our first sponsor is South Tampa Jiu-Jitsu and MMA. Learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and mixed martial arts in a family-friendly environment from some of Tampa's best martial artists. Check them out at SouthTampaJiu-Jitsu.com. Our next sponsor is Nopiate Topical Pain Ointment, the toughest topical pain reliever for the combat athlete. Get back on the grind with Nopiate Pain Relief, found only at www.nopiate.com. That's NOPIATE.com. Next episode, starting now.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Nick, 4D Combatives, and I'm with my buddy Lane.
Hey, what's up? Lane Andrews, 4D Combatives.
And this is our new gun blog. I guess not just a blog, a vlog, right? Would that be considered a vlog?
What is a vlog?
Video blog? Not
video
really.
Blog?
Maybe not.
Vlog?
I don't know.
Vlog sounds
Podcast sounds better.
Podcast. Yeah. Why don't we say 4D Combatives, Firearms and Self-Defense, or Firearms and Defense Podcast?
I like that. That's cool. So, just introduction. My name is Nick again, and background on me. I'm a pharmacist, a hobbyist gun collector, I guess you could say. I just really enjoy the history of guns, the mechanics of them, and so on. Gun laws, politics. It covers a lot.
And I suck at politics, but I'll try to keep up with Nick, so I'll play the dumb guy.
Now, Lane's actually quite intelligent. So just starting off, this is a first podcast. We'll talk about the election because it was really close to here two days ago. And first thing would be is Donald Trump won.
Yeah, it's craziness. Huh?
It's very crazy, very crazy.
Of course, I'm a self-defense expert here. I've got a lot of years of training jiu-jitsu and martial arts, and guns are something that I got into really just a couple years ago. But it's turned into an incredible passion of mine, so much so that I bought a ranch and built berms and started teaching. So for me, the election with Trump was, I don't know, a little uncertain, even though for my Second Amendment rights, I certainly wanted him to win. But at the same time, there's an unpredictability to him, which could turn out to be a good thing. But, it could also, I am a little concerned about the markets and the condition of our country and so on.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's definitely as the Second Amendment guys, I think, we want the guy who's going to put the best laws forward for us, protect the Second Amendment as much as possible. But at the same time, I think he's very, unpredictable. The guy's not really a politician. He has no history of anything that we can kind of look at and say, okay, he was a pro-gun there. So we have, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. He is a Republican, but at one time he was a Democrat.
He was a Democrat. That's a big deal and he was a New York Democrat, which, has had a gun ban. New York City's had a gun ban forever. The thing is, though, I think regardless, I think our gun rights are safe. That's not anything he's going to tackle, especially with a Republican Congress. I don't think being voted in as a Republican, he would go there. And it doesn't even seem to be an issue. He'd referenced the NRA several times in the debates. So truly not concerned about my gun rights being taken away or anything like that. Whereas I was afraid with Hillary Clinton. A lot of liberals, we use this term loosely, some of them are my good friends. They always say, well, no one's going to take your guns away. And I probably would have said the same thing until I got into firearms. But then you realize that, wait a second. There are a lot of people out there who would love nothing more than to take our guns away. So to hear people say that, almost as if we're making some non-intelligent judgment as a part of a vote. The Second Amendment isn't all of my vote. As a part of our vote, being around the Second Amendment, that we're making this ridiculous judgment, that we're paranoid, is absolutely not true. There are a lot of people who would like to take our guns away, and given the opportunity, over time, they'll continue to chip away at those rights.
I completely agree. I mean, history tends to repeat itself, and there's been multiple times in history where even recent history, you can look at the Philippines and the person who was in charge, they said, turn in all your guns. I don't remember the emperor at the time's name in the Philippines, but he was, Ferdinand Marcos. Ferdinand Marcos said, first thing he did when he got power was everybody register your gun, or if you own a gun, you have to turn it in. If you don't turn it in, it's a death penalty. And, this is what happens with dictators and people who want to control the populace, the average citizen, your average Joe who, just feels like he needs a firearm for self-defense or something even more stronger for hunting. So this has gone throughout history multiple times, and from people do say, like, we don't want to take your guns, we just want more regulation on it. Well, it's been proven, and that's why everybody's so hesitant in the NRA. It's been proven that one step leads to the next step, and it's a slippery slope that never seems to end sometimes. And I understand the hesitation from guns rights activists and the NRA and just people hobbyists, really. So,
yeah, the NRA is interesting to me because I would classify them as an extremist organization, mm-hmm. and I'm mm-hmm. an NRA member. Mm-hmm. But I've kind of resolved to the fact that in order to fight an extreme, you've got to be an extreme, mm-hmm. and so it's very important to me that they lobby the way they do. I mean, I used to, when I wasn't into guns, I would get somewhat annoyed by them. Like, I thought they were a little paranoid, but I get it. Mm-hmm. You have some extreme people on the other side that you're fighting, and mm-hmm. then everybody else in the middle.
So what are your thoughts on the background checks? Do you think that there should be background checks on all guns?
I think we already do have background checks. I mean, depending on the state. I know mm-hmm. in the state of Florida, it's one thing that always cracks me up is people throw out all these talking points. One is the gun show loophole. Yeah. The other, which the gun show loophole is no more than if I sold the gun to my brother. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, it's the same.
You're right. It's absolutely, right? Same thing.
You don't have to do a background check if we're selling person to person, friend to friend, family to family. Mm-hmm. So the background check with the gun, if you're buying from a retailer at a gun show, you got to have a background check anyway.
Right.
When I always laughed at some comedians who would make the joke how easy it is to get a weapon.
Oh, yeah.
Easier than buying
guns. Oh, yeah, exactly.
You see these spoons.
Yeah, exactly.
Walk in and they throw guns at a 14-year-old kid. And,
yeah. You want vegetables, you get vegetables, and here's your Glock right next to a zucchini. And you're like,
Yeah. Before I had my concealed carry, there was a 3-day wait. Mm-hmm. That means, they did a background check, mm-hmm. and then they made you wait 3 days to pick up your weapon. Mm-hmm. Now that I have my concealed carry, yes, I can take it out of the store in the same day, mm-hmm. but they go through a background check to make sure that, that my record's clean and, I can own a gun based on current law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that there is enough laws on the books when it comes to background checks, when it comes to gun laws in general. They say there's about 20,000 gun laws on the books where it's like, let's enforce gun laws that are already in existence instead of just start creating new laws for law-abiding people to just have to jump through these extra hoops. Obviously, it's illegal for a felon to possess a firearm. It's illegal for a felon to shoot a gun. It's illegal for people who have misdemeanors who are violent misdemeanors to even own weapons in some states. So I think there's enough laws on the books right now that I think if we really want to crack down on gun crime, we really should focus on the actual the perpetrators.
Yeah, 100% agree.
So I guess switching gears, if you look at the political climate now, in my opinion, I think, yes, gun rights are pretty safe. Hopefully they're going to be a little bit more aggressive towards expanding them in the next 2 years at least. There's a GOP-controlled House, Senate, and obviously a Republican president. So what are your thoughts in terms of expanding that? You think that we should go? What direction?
Oh, and expanding gun rights?
Yeah, it's expanding rights, yeah.
Boy, that's a tough question. I don't know that I've really thought about gun rights mm-hmm. expanding because I've been so happy to just know that they might not be infringed upon in the next administration. So I don't really have an answer to that off the top of my head.
That's all right. I think that there's like I hope that there's not a complacency that says, okay, our gun rights aren't going to be attacked for the next few years, we'll be good. But I think it's important to try to expand the gun rights in terms of a national reciprocity for concealed carry. Meaning,
100%.
If I go to, I'm originally from New York, so if I go to New York, upstate New York, and I want to see some of my family members or down in New York City, that yeah, I can abide by their gun laws. Okay, I can only have 7 rounds or 10 rounds, whatever their gun laws are, but I should be able to still carry my permit. I've done my background check. I've had my fingerprints done with a concealed weapons permit. I don't see any reason why I turn into a felon there. And I think the federal government needs to step in and say, if you have a permit from one state, just like a driver's license,
it should be.
Exactly.
Well, there was a lady in Pennsylvania who was a concealed carry holder, I believe, in the state of Pennsylvania, and she was driving with her child in New Jersey, got pulled over, had her weapon. And if you know anything about that area, that tri-state area up there, there's a lot of areas. You can be in Jersey for a few minutes and then back in PA.
Exactly.
You're in and out of the various states all the time. And now, if I'm not mistaken, she has a felony. So
she did get charged and she did get pardoned by Chris Christie. But that's, I mean, even to be put in that situation, I think is quite asinine.
Well, it's traumatic to her. It's traumatic to the kids. And if the government's under different leadership, she may not have gotten that pardon.
I agree. And it's definitely I think when it comes to expanding gun rights, I think that's the first thing that needs to happen, in my opinion, in terms of keeping gun rights, not gun rights, just gun owners in general safe throughout the country. I think that keeps them safe because there is I guess you could say like a different network of gun laws for each state, and having a concealed weapons permit should be, analogous to a driver's license, in my opinion.
No, I agree. I did not think of that, but that is a very logical step and a great way to improve the, to expand our gun rights.
So I don't know if you're familiar with, but there is a machine gun ban.
Yes.
Meaning you can't own any fully automatic weapons made after 1986. So there's a freeze on every gun made before 1986, and there's extraordinary prices to own them. How would you feel if, this administration said, we overturn a machine gun ban? Do you feel like that's constitutional? Do you feel like that would be a good idea? Or you think it's completely nuts with people owning automatic weapons?
Ooh, okay. Interesting, because the automatic weapon ban, if I'm not mistaken, was right after the big cocaine, epidemic.
Yeah, Cocaine Cowboys.
Cocaine Cowboys documentary. It's a great documentary if you haven't seen it.
For sure.
But my concern, I don't know, because me personally, I probably would own a machine gun just to own it, but would I use it for any tactical civilian purpose?
Yeah,
probably not. Now, with that said, I know the Second Amendment is more about potentially fighting your own government or
tyranny of some sort.
Yeah, some sort of tyranny. So in that case, it may be important that we have those style of weapons. But for my personal defense, it's not something that I really need, because I want to be somewhat, I want to use discretion in the bullets, the rate of fire, to make sure that I'm hitting the target, especially if it's some sort of active shooter type situation.
Right.
I want to make sure that if I'm shooting a bullet, that it's hitting the appropriate target. But at the same time, it is unconstitutional to not allow those kind of weapons.
Completely agree.
I don't see it's one of those things where if something's banned for so long, you just kind of assume that it's
completely illegal.
Yeah, it's just kind of off the table.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like like marijuana is becoming more legal in other states, and for the longest time, you're just like, well, it's banned; it's an illegal drug.
Yeah.
And now we're finding out that there's a ton of medicinal benefits,
agreed,
as well as recreational benefits, without all the downside that that people are afraid of. And so, man, I'd have to say that although it's not something that I would put on the docket first, it's something that, in the interest of expanding gun rights, I think it's well within our rights to do that.
I completely agree. I think the idea, the landmark decision was Heller versus D.C., which protected, most people thought it was protected anyways, but the courts confirmed that the individual right of a citizen in the United States has a right to own a firearm for self-defense. And the idea in the decision was, they said that, you're allowed to what's in common use, comparatively almost to the military. So what does the military use? M4s, automatic weapons. And I think it's constitutional I think it's unconstitutional to ban them. I think you can make regulations and make them very tough. Make them, obviously you're talking about a serious weapon that can do a lot of damage. I think making them very tough is important, but I think a complete outright ban is unconstitutional. So I think this is something we won't even see. I probably won't even see in my lifetime, realistically.
Realistically, I don't think so. It's fun to speculate.
Yeah, it's fun. That's really like, on the probably the more radical end, but I think a lot of gun rights guys would like that back. So moving forward, with now we have a Senate that is GOP. We have House, which is GOP, and we have a president, Republican president. What do you think in terms of judicial, the Supreme Court? What do you think is the way to go? Do you think Donald Trump should hold off on appointing a judicial, I guess you could say, a judge, a Supreme Court judge, and kind of vet them very well as to make sure they're Second Amendment friendly? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yes. I mean, I think you certainly want to. There's no rush to do that, right? So, I mean, I think you certainly want to make sure that they're Second Amendment friendly. And really, my interest in appointing a judge is that I'm not, I'm a conservative guy when it comes to finances, when it comes to my gun rights, but I'm somewhat liberal on things like
socially.
Yeah, socially.
I'm quite the
abortion,
same way.
etc. So
you're right.
It's not really my choice, I don't think, in terms of those, but I would like to see something that is a right in the Constitution of the United States be protected.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I'm same thing. Pretty socially liberal. I mean, I think that individual freedoms are very, very important, but I also think that, like, when you come to fiscally, we can go into probably dig deep into that in terms of our national debt and so on. But yeah, the gun rights, it's, this is 2 days after the election now, which in my opinion was a surprising result.
Oh my goodness!
Looking at the polls,
talk about the election a little more. That was some shit, man.
Absolutely. You want to lead off?
Yeah, I'm sitting there, right, and I do not like Donald Trump as a person. I'll say that.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
And I disagree with almost everything that he says when it comes to rhetoric, when it comes to inciting people, insulting people, all of the things. I got 2 daughters. It's hard to explain those commercials to them throughout, and I tried not to push any political agenda. I said, look, there are things we don't like about both of them, and I voted Libertarian. I was one of the few that voted Gary Johnson, and I know that he had some major fuck-ups, but for me it was more of a statement, more of a statement of, I firmly believe that we need more than 2 parties to really meet the needs of all American citizens. If not, we all have to compromise our beliefs. But it can't be 3 parties either, because then you get basically, if you have a Libertarian Party, they're probably going to steal more from conservatives, from Republicans than Democrats. And of course, if you have the Green Party, they're going to take more from Democrats than Republicans. So I think if we make that move, it should be to 4. But I'm sitting on my couch watching this election go down. And I did not think there was any way Donald Trump was going to win. I thought he kind of had a fighter's chance. He's a winner. Yeah. You got to admire that about him, and I hope that produces great results for our country.
Agreed.
But I'm watching it, and I'm like, I kind of hope he does better than
a straight blowout.
Yeah, I think, and I'm kind of rooting for him to win a few states. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh shit, he's like really in this thing.
Yeah.
Like 100%. So I'm starting to get like nervous. And now I'm contemplating like, well, do I really want him to win? Who do I really want to win? It was like it was like sometimes when I watch a football game and I don't really have an interest in either team. Yeah. I'll say, of course my Second Amendment rights are at stake, but I whatever. That aside, you don't have an interest in any team and you're just hoping for a good game. Yeah. And then as the game goes on, you kind of in your mind start to pick who you really want to win, right? So I had this really unsettled feeling about him winning that kind of surprised me, just not because of my Second Amendment rights, but I do some finance on the side. Right. And I'm looking at stock market futures. Yeah. And the more momentum he gains, the more they were down. Yeah. And I'm thinking about my portfolio. 401ks. And I'm like, holy shit, man. We're getting ready to go through like another recession. Plus, he's very unpredictable and he's a very controversial candidate. So it doesn't surprise me that we're seeing, I don't agree with him at all. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's, I think in the extreme liberal end, it shows the childness and the moral superiority that they think they have to conservatives. The riots and the flag burning, and all that stuff is bullshit.
It is real true bullshit. Yeah,
crazy.
It's crybaby stuff, and it's really just people who are. It seems like most people I've seen who are in these doing these riots, they're young 20-somethings, college students. Typically liberals. Typically is.
Don't you think there should be like some sort of life experience qualification in order to protest and or vote?
And or the voting thing is something that like I do believe to a certain degree, but at the same time I look at it as like what is voted upon does affect them, so they should have a say.
Yeah, it does. It does. The problem is you've got since the Democratic Party has kind of transitioned away from losing more of its white middle class. You know, because they had a big run with union workers,
right? Yeah, absolutely.
Back in the day,
50s and 60s, so on.
So it's become more intellectualized, and part of the pulpit is universities. In universities, these college students. I mean, I think I voted Democrat when I was in college, and maybe the first election outside of college.
I did. I think I voted Obama the first election.
Yeah, I didn't.
2008.
But I think mine was Al Gore.
Gotcha.
You know? So. And then, you know, you get a little older, you get a little wiser, and you start paying taxes, and you start realizing, like, look, man, they're not doing anything with this money that's good.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's a Democrat or Republican in there, they're wasting a lot of money.
So much.
So, I just refuse to give them more. So, I mean, a lot of my vote is heavily weighed on taxes as well. But it was a crazy election, man. I don't know what else to say about it.
No, yeah, it was absolutely crazy, and I was telling you earlier, I had a wager which I put in June. I put it a while ago, and my hope was that I was telling some of the other guys on the jiu-jitsu mats that I thought she was going to be indicted in July. That's my thought process. So I put the bet in June for 2-1 odds. Right. And I was like, she's going to be indicted in July, and there's no way she can win. When she didn't get indicted, I was like, oh, okay, well, you know, he could still win this, and then he was just falling apart. That tape came out of, you know, a real vulgar one where he's like grab her by the pussy or something ridiculous, and his numbers tanked. And I would watch the polls every day and read the polls, and I'm like, you know, there was numbers where it was like Hillary's up plus 12, plus 14, and you're like, those numbers are like, those are insurmountable numbers if that's true. Yeah. And to a certain part of me said, you know, the part that didn't want to lose said that, like, well, I don't believe the polls. A little bit, I don't believe the polls, but when you see so many of them, truly so many polls said that she was up 5, 7, 8 points. I think in Florida she was up 2 or 3 points, and she ended up getting beat by 2 or 3 points. And just watching the polls and so on, I started thinking, like, it started getting to me, like, where it's like, yeah, Donald's not going to win this. There's no way. Like, you know, I have a stake in the horse in the game, I guess you could say. So I did vote for Donald, and I'm not a big fan of him. I think that the Republicans could have put up someone way better than him, but that's, you know, they elected who they elected. And when I saw him win Florida, I said, okay, well, first thing was he won Florida, and I was like, all right, that's one step. Now you got now you got to, like, you know, draw an inside straight 3 times. You know what I mean, in a row. So
what was crazy was, you know, when you're seeing the battle for Michigan and Wisconsin, you're like
states that have never gone red in yet. Exactly.
Haven't gone in years. Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I think 1988 Pennsylvania, and 1984 was Wisconsin. The last time they were. Those were Reagan days. So Reagan and Bush days, that like a long time ago, and very interesting that he appealed. I think somebody said it, like Michael Moore, who I'm not a big fan of at all, but he said he's like Donald Trump. He's a douche. Yeah, he's like he tapped into the pulse of the heartland of America, and he tapped into these people who, you know, are affected by these policies that were Obama policies. Yeah. And he's like, you know.
Yeah, and you know, people say tapped in as if he like used those people somehow.
Yeah.
I don't think he used those people at all.
Not at all.
I think he was more in tune.
He heard him. He heard him out.
What the people wanted.
Yeah.
Than anybody in Washington.
Agreed.
Because nobody in Washington thought he had a chance.
Right.
So you've got some of those Reagan Democrats coming over.
Exactly.
But I think the other factor too was that we had a lot of closet Trump fans.
Yeah.
That were kind of embarrassed to shout it out loud.
You're right.
You know? That not really admit that they were voting for the guy because he is such a douche.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when they have to kind of sort out with the 2-party system that we have, you have to make some compromises in who your candidate is.
Yeah.
You know, you have to line up your priorities. and make sure that you're balancing those somewhat, and try to vote for the in this case the lesser of two evils.
Absolutely, yeah, it was the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier that I'm socially liberal, and I don't think there's a lot of in I had a boss one time ask me about that. He goes, he's talking to me. We hung out for years, and he goes, "Man," he goes, "you're religious." And I was like, "Oh, no, I'm not particularly religious." Yeah. He says, "Abortion's your issue." I'm like, "No, not really."
Yeah, yeah.
And he goes, "I don't get it. Why are you Republican?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't really say I'm Republican, but I vote that way a lot of the times." I said, "Here's the reason," because he says that bottom, that far right of the Republican Party just scares him to death. And my point to him was the liberals on the left scare me to death.
That's how I feel.
And he goes, "Yeah, but I said, here's my key point. I think the extremists on the far right, there's a clear ceiling on how far they can go. There are just certain things people aren't going to tolerate, regardless of administration. Right. I'm not sure that they can turn back gay marriage. Right. Maybe abortion, depending on who the next Supreme Court judge is. Right. But there are some things socially and in terms of civil rights that they can't really turn back the clock. Right. And I do really think that there are a lot of Republicans out there that are more concerned about civil rights issues than people give them credit for.
Agreed.
And they just can't agree on what the path is for that.
Yeah, I agree. It's I'm very the same way in terms of like a pretty socially liberal, and I think that at this point now, they're not going to turn back any sort of civil rights or marriage equality. I think that absolutely should. I don't. Like, you said you voted libertarian. I'm probably a libertarian, really. I really am a libertarian. It's just that I don't want to give my vote up that direction.
There's the two things, right? It's like, well, your vote doesn't count, you idiot. You know, what are you doing?
Right.
I had a student of mine, people were laying into him over voting for Gary Johnson.
I know this.
Because they're like, you're the reason that Hillary lost. And I'm like, I don't think Gary Johnson's people would have voted for Hillary. I think more of them would have swung conservative.
Exactly. Agreed.
Yeah. This particular guy, I don't know. But I was telling the story about my boss, and I kind of forgot to conclude it.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So we were talking about the ceiling of the far right of the Republican Party versus not having a ceiling on the damage that the far left of the Democratic Party can do. Right. So I think there's a clear ceiling on certain issues, certain rights. The Nazis aren't coming back. Nobody's a Nazi.
Right.
But there's no ceiling on how far the far left can spend us into debt. And continue to give away free programs. When, Obama really lost me. First of all, I was upset that he won. I wanted a businessman in office because I just think they make better fiscal decisions. And I think one of the reasons we have so many freedoms that we have, and we can obsess over things like gender pronouns and gay marriage and civil rights, is because people are eating. Most people have shelter. Not all of it is good. Yeah. But the basic hierarchy of needs are met.
Yeah. Right? Food, water, shelter kind of thing. Like
So when that happens, you can think and you can push society forward.
Right. Yeah.
But there's a fine line in doing that. I remember watching Obama in 2008 talk the stock market down for like 6 months. Yes, we were in the recession. It dropped significantly because of the recession. But I watched it drop. I think the Dow was like, maybe the top was like 13.5, and it was the 10.5 range when he got into office. And he consistently talked about the doom and gloom that we had ahead of us. Yeah. And I would watch the market drop. It kind of sustained at about 10.5. I could be wrong on those numbers, but bear with me. And I'm referring to the Dow here. And then it kind of leveled out there for a few months. And then as he continued to talk, you watched it go down into the 6,000 range. So it lost over 50% of its original value, not all because of him, but watched him talk that down to get a stimulus plan passed. The problem was it wasn't just a stimulus plan. Right. I'm not opposed to socialized medicine in a sense. I shouldn't say that. I am kind of opposed to it. But if you're going to do socialized medicine, you don't do it in the middle of a recession. when we have a national debt that's just in the trillions.
Yeah.
You don't make it deeper to do socialized medicine.
Yeah.
Socialized medicine doesn't provide jobs. It killed some jobs.
Yeah.
And nobody in the
medical
salaries
and no.
So that was first of all, I was proud that we elected our first black president.
Yeah.
I was extremely proud about that. And then, but as I watched him talk the market down, he lost me. And the reason he talked the market down was primarily to get the socialized medicine bill, the Obamacare bill, passed. Mm-hmm. And honestly, if you're going to do it, don't do it during the middle of a recession.
Yeah.
And we do that when we're in a surplus, when we're not in a deficit. You cannot take on more social programs. It's a beautiful idea to have everybody's health care covered.
Yeah, and
everybody's
utopia.
College paid for. And all that stuff. But we can't continue to force these things down the American taxpayer's throat.
Yeah.
When we don't have a surplus to pay for them.
Right.
We can't pay for the programs that we already have.
Exactly.
Social Security is a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. It's going to run out. I mean, it's awful.
Yeah, we have Medicaid, Medicare. Those things, they're not funded to the levels that they need to be, in particular Social Security. Mm-hmm. So why would we take on another social program when we're in the largest debt of our country's history? And I think that was not only by value, but what's important is to measure percentage points, right? Mm-hmm. Why would we take on a project and expense that big when that's going on? And when you have I lost my train of thought for a second. But, so you've got the debt, you've got a recession. Yeah. Recession was the other one. Why would you take that on? It's just stupid. It doesn't make any sense. And it really pissed me off. And I don't think I listened to a single speech he gave after that. He completely lost me.
Really? Okay.
Completely lost
me. The socialized medicine, I'm in the medical field. I don't agree with it. The United States is really on the forefront. And we're going to kind of go off topic of guns right now, but that's right, because this is just a practice run anyways. This is politics. And the socialized medicine, I'm not a big fan of, because the United States is really on the forefront, really spearheading new drugs, new therapies, new medicine, which entails everything, like all sorts of new surgeries and so on. People expect to be paid for those things. If a drug company comes out with a drug that, say, the new hepatitis cure that they came out with, and they came out with it and they expect to get paid. So they've made now $8 billion on it. It's a lot of money. And, when is enough? Well, that's, for who to decide, nobody knows. But the fact is they're not going to do that without capitalism, without some incentive to get reimbursed by it. So the new drug is like $30,000 per month or something like that, but you only do it for 3 months. But anyways, people don't have to deal with hepatitis. They don't have to deal with a possible liver transplant, which is extremely expensive. The thing about it is that the incentive to these pharmaceutical companies, the incentives to these doctors to take care of them, those incentives are really what drive capitalism, which drives people wanting to grow and the economy really to expand, in my opinion. You know more about this than I do, but I just know that getting back to socialized medicine, I think it's an awful idea, and they shoved it down our throats. Yes. And when you hear someone like I forget the Democratic representative, I forget her name, out of California, says Nancy Pelosi, exactly. We got to pass it to read it. And you're like, and it's just like,
it's so funny.
It's so funny because, but
who
at
else
the same,
does that?
like,
if I'm a business owner, I don't take on an expense and then read the contract.
Exactly. And it's that train of thought that they have. And I'm not going to put California down because I think the state is beautiful.
They're on the house's money.
Exactly.
They're not on their own money. They don't produce shit.
Exactly.
All they do is take.
You're absolutely right.
Politicians do.
You're
all the government does is take.
Right.
They don't produce anything.
Exactly. And they rely on the backs of all the taxpayers to produce, perform, and when they raise the taxes, it's just extra stress for everybody else to have to cough up. So they shoved it down our throats, and it was really frustrating how it was passed. And I think I'm absolutely sure that's the reason why they lost the House in 2010, and then they ended up losing the Senate in 2014 because of just really ramming that down our throats. It's just really frustrating the way it was passed. But
yeah, it is. But we can get back to gun rights.
Getting back to gun rights. And how does this all play into guns? It does all play into guns, actually, because we're talking about the idea, the mindset of some of these politicians. And I'm not going to say everybody's a Democrat is awful by any means. It's not the truth. And there's
a whole spectrum.
Exactly, a whole spectrum of people out there. But the idea is that when it comes to gun rights, you have people who are looking to put regulations on them, but really, where do the regulations stop? It feels like the regulations don't stop until all the guns are gone.
Yes.
Round them all up. Round them all up. And it's been said before by Dianne Feinstein, senator out of California. If I could tell Mr. and Mrs. America to turn them all in, I would. If I had the votes to do it, she said. And I mean, that thinking is like saying the Second Amendment doesn't mean anything to me.
No, wait, man. Don't worry. No one's going to take your guns away. You're stupid. You're paranoid.
And that's the rhetoric you hear. And you're like, and that's why it's so frustrating. But
it is so frustrating.
You know, I respect the NRA, and I think the NRA does a great job. I know you may not be as favorable thoughts on that, but my thoughts are that they really hold the line as, you know, they've given a lot before. They've given a lot. The Firearm Owners Protection Act in 1986 and the Gun Control Act of 1968, all those gun rights, not gun rights, all those movements by the government, all the laws passed, they took rights away from people, actually. And finally it got to the point of 1994 where the assault weapons bill by Bill Clinton, it came out to be like, guess what? These guns are banned now too. And then it's like, when is the end of this? When is really the end? And the NRA finally said, that's it. This won't happen again. And this is the line is drawn. No more. And
I totally get it. Yeah. And, you know, I don't want to, I'm not like an NRA, anti-NRA.
No, I know you're not. Yeah.
But I think, and I agree with their position, you know, and I understand their position. I guess I'm speaking to kind of thinking about an outside person who's not a gun owner,
right?
You know, who might think like, man, they're extreme. Don't you think they're extreme?
Right.
But I get why, and they are. Yeah. But I get why they're extreme. You know, they absolutely have to be in order for the Second Amendment to stand and us to preserve that right.
I agree. And I mean, to some people, it may seem extreme, but at the same time, like the ACLU, are they extreme? I mean, if they're protecting American civil rights, you know, say there's some sort of a racial thing that happens, the ACLU steps in. Do we ever say, oh, the ACLU, well, they shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
The ACLU is a terrorist group. No, we don't. Nobody says that. Everyone's like, well, listen, they're protecting our constitutional rights. And the ACLU has actually stepped in for the Second Amendment before and said, you know, they gave their opinion.
To be extreme.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what these lobbyist type organizations are for. I got a funny story on that front. One time, I was teaching at a martial arts academy. I had a gym just like I do now, an MMA and jiu-jitsu gym out of a traditional karate academy. We had a guy named Ron White. He's a black school owner, karate school owner. And, you know, one day I walk into his office and he's like, listen to this shit. And he starts to play a voicemail. And he's like, this is so-and-so from the NAACP. And I just wanted to know if there are any black people training at your white Christian martial arts academy. You know, and he's looking at me like, these dumbasses.
Yeah.
You know, and I think he said that. Like, these dumbasses are calling me. Like, we should do a little research. But again, it kind of goes back to, you know, it takes an extreme to fight an extreme. But that's just a kind of funny
That's funny, story. Yeah. That's wild. Yeah, so, I mean, all these things, they do tie into gun rights that we talk about if we do go on tangents. And it doesn't, the entire thing doesn't have to be just about gun rights, because politics.
We're just having a conversation.
Exactly.
That's fine.
And so I was surprised. Let me say, getting back to the election, I was really, really surprised that he won Florida, then he was holding North Carolina. Then I saw him smash Hillary Clinton in Ohio. And then I started thinking, because I was on a voice chat with my dad and my 3 uncles and my aunt, who's a diehard liberal, on the phone, and they're screaming and shouting. And when I saw Virginia's numbers were really good, it looked like he was going to win it, but he ended up losing it. And then Michigan and Wisconsin, so on. I was like, he's going to win. He's going to win. And it seems like I was saying earlier, he really tapped into some sort of this feeling throughout Middle America that people feel like they're not being heard.
I grew up in Middle America. I know exactly what he tapped into. You know, my parents both worked in factories. My grandpa was an old union guy. And, you know, they felt like nobody hears their voice for years. Right. And it does not, you know, a lot of people, I've heard the chatter about, oh, he tapped into the racist vein of the USA. And you know, to me, that's that's hysterical that people believe that. I mean, I understand people's fear there, but that's absolutely not the truth. No, what he tapped into is there are communities in Middle America that have died because factories have left the Midwest.
Coal mining and
well, coal mining is one, but more importantly, auto manufacturers, a lot of their suppliers. So you had Detroit, right? And then you had all of these auto suppliers and steel mills that would feed the whole automobile industry.
Right.
And when those jobs started to get outsourced and left, people were then left without jobs. One particular example is Gary, Indiana. Gary, Indiana is a predominantly African American community.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's where the Jacksons are from.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds familiar.
Yeah, any Indiana person will tell you like the 3 or 4 famous people that came from our state. So
right.
You have to excuse me. We take great pride in that.
That's cool.
But that community was a place that after the Civil War,
mm-hmm.
or not after the Civil War, but after probably, I don't know, I'm going to say the early 1900s. Don't hold me to that, people.
Mm-hmm.
But through the industrial age, that a lot of African Americans would go to
mm-hmm.
to get good, high-paying factory jobs because they paid pretty well.
Really?
At that time.
Mm-hmm.
When those factories started moving out, people didn't have any place to go.
Right.
And it was at one time the murder capital of the world. And if you know anything about Gary, Indiana, it's just south of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
It's right there on the border. It's a border city, but it was a relatively thriving community for good paying middle class jobs that were predominantly African American, and they were destroyed by the outsourcing as well. So I get that frustration
mm-hmm.
In that part of the country because that's where I'm from.
Yeah, and so he tapped in. I don't mean tap is like an offensive thing by any means. He just he heard the people out, and I think he did what he had to do. And I really hope he acts upon the things he says he's going to do. I really hope he delivers. And I think President Obama actually said it the other day. We want him to do good. It's like we're all on a plane, and we don't want the captain to crash. Because we're all going with him anyway. So it's we want him to do well.
I felt the same way about Obama. I'm like, man,
mm-hmm.
I don't agree with this, but I hope it works.
I hope it works, yeah.
For the sake of everybody.
Exactly.
And Trump is interesting, too, because he's not only at one time a Democrat, he's also kind of a nationalistic, kind of populist type leader, which...
Make America great again. I mean, really such a simple phrase that a lot of people got behind.
Yeah.
And it's like a simple thing to say, make America great, because really... Who doesn't want to make America great? You know what I mean? It's such a great phrase. I think that definitely helped his campaign. Absolutely.
It did, 100%. And I know a lot of people are in support of globalization, and I enjoy. I mean, I think globalization is a good thing, but within balance, like anything else, right? You've got to find that balance, because the more that we get other economies tied to us, the less likely we are to fight over resources.
Exactly.
And that's a way for America to kind of share its wealth by making eventually a middle class in Mexico, a middle class in China.
Yeah.
It starts off really rough, just like our industrial revolution did. I mean, there, you hear a lot of people are talking about, well, you should pay people a fair wage in Mexico. You should pay them. It's all relative.
Right.
Our workers had to fight for those rights, unfortunately, and people died over some of those disputes.
Mm-hmm.
A great timepiece documentary is what's it called? The Men Who Built America.
I can check that out.
That is intriguing.
Really?
And it goes through our whole industrial.
Was that on the History Channel?
I think so. I think you can get it on Netflix.
Okay, I'll check that.
You'll be able to find it.
Yeah, for sure.
Someplace. You may have to buy per episode, but it's really intriguing, and it shows kind of the rough starts of capitalism. How it was a brutal process, and workers were abused. But at some point, that shifts.
Right.
And then workers get more power because there's more of them. There's more skilled labor or unskilled labor, or there's more jobs to, and there's to fill that void in the unskilled labor. So people become less of a commodity. You ultimately have to raise their wages, and you create a strong middle class. And kind of going through some of those growing pains is what created our strong middle class.
Right.
In the 40s, 50s, 60s.
Yeah.
So.
Very cool. I gotta look into that.
It's great, and I think it ties right into the election, and then after that was, of course, kind of you started to see the deterioration of kind of an extreme globalization that we did, an extreme outsourcing that we did of jobs. But I'm not 100% against outsourcing, and I think it's a good way to get other countries tied to us. So if we're all working together, we're not going to war. We're not fighting over the resources.
Exactly.
But there's got to be some balance. It can't all be taken away from people in our society who may not have the ability to create their own jobs,
right,
and that need to rely on business owners and government to create it for them.
Mm-hmm. No, that's well said. I agree with a lot of what you said. I mean, you're really teaching me a lot of stuff because history was never really like my best class. So I mean, I definitely am interested in hearing that. And I will do my research too because I want to check that out on the History Channel. So yeah, this what do we got for time? It's 10:02. It's 10:02. We're at about the 45-minute mark. Yeah. You want about 45 minutes? Or you want to do like a full hour? I mean, we could just talk normal.
Let's talk about one more subject.
Okay, yeah.
We can do that.
You want me to choose, or you want to choose?
No, I got one.
All right, go ahead.
Magazine capacity.
Magazine capacity. It's actually, I was listening to some debate on this the other day, and I think there should be no limit, but I think there are things that are like a little ridiculous. But I think magazine capacity, most people have ARs, AR-15. They have a 30-round magazine. I think it's a standard capacity magazine. I think that's normal. I think, guys you see with drum magazines and stuff, I don't think it should be outlawed. I think most people can agree that it's a little ridiculous and not very practical, not very tactical. Not that I'm tactical by any means. I don't really, but at the same time, like you look at it, you're like, is that even work? And
it's hard to get your grip right.
Exactly. Really, it's awkward. Exactly.
If those things were like the be all end all, the military would use them.
Exactly.
20 round and 30
You're absolutely
round
right.
magazines.
That's the best way to put it.
But you know what? It's fucking America, and they're fun. There's
so
a part
ridiculous.
of me that likes to buy those things sometimes, just because I hate the idea that somebody can tell me I can't have them.
Exactly.
Like, why can't I have them?
It makes it more fun to own something that someone that doesn't want you to have it.
Yeah. Restrict a felon from having them.
Yeah, of course.
And I get the arguments.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people who argue against magazine capacity don't really understand
guns,
and they don't really understand not only traditional threats, but I think our current threat,
right?
The active shooter threat, and I use that, or you know what? I'll use this term, active killer threat. And one of my Israeli friends who served in the Israeli Special Forces, he uses that term because he's like, it could be a knife, it could be somebody with a truck bomb, it could be a lot of different things. And you have to have, first of all, and you hear the stat all the time, right? And this may not be the exact stat, but bear with me here, it's close. The average gunfight's like 3 bullets or 2 bullets or something like that.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
You've also heard the phrase that you can drown in a river that's 6 inches deep. You can't prepare for the average because the reality is the gunfight, not that I've been in a gunfight, but from what the professional operators that I know tell me, 3 to 5 shots at a minimum to drop a person.
Wow.
If you have 3 active killers working together in a team, or if that active killer, if you have one that has body armor on, and you have a 10-round magazine, you can blow through those 10 rounds before you even
pierce their body armor,
realize that they have body armor on and recognize the fact that you may have to take a headshot.
Yeah.
Good luck doing that under pressure.
Exactly.
Or if you have 3 assailants and you have 10 rounds, I mean, you start popping off rounds in one because you're going to shoot until they drop.
Yeah.
You're not going to. It's not a movie. I think part of the problem is we have a very Wild West kind of culture, and a lot of our culture is dictated by what we see Keanu Reeves do in a movie.
Yeah. Or, the Matrix is some ridiculous thing,
some crazy thing. Or what's the other one? John Wick.
John Wick,
is the new one, right? I couldn't even finish watching that movie because I'm like,
it's so outrageous.
It's so unrealistic. Whereas I would have enjoyed that like 5 years ago. But it doesn't happen like that.
Right.
In any training that I've done, you shoot until they drop. Whether that's 3 rounds, 1 round, 15 rounds, whatever.
Yeah.
If you have 3 assailants, you're not going to be like counting bullets. Oh, there are my 5. I need 5 more for this guy. So let me switch. I need 5 more over here. I will carry on average a minimum of 15 rounds. A minimum.
Yeah.
So I think even the restriction, some like California has the magazine ban to 10 rounds.
10.
I think that's, I think you're not understanding.
Yeah.
Maybe the traditional threat, maybe the criminal threat.
Yeah.
A
one-on-one in the back alleyway.
One-on-one in the back alleyway. But with an active shooter or an active killer, it may take more bullets than that. And that's the reality that we face.
Agreed.
And I don't think you can look at averages and make a law based on averages. Should we have a 3-round magazine if we're going to make it based on averages?
And that's what it's come down to. I mean, New York State started with a 10-round ban, and then Andrew Cuomo decided to make it a 7-round, and they found that unconstitutional, so they went back to 10-round. And it's like, where is this arbitrary numbers? Like, what is this? Has it been proven that 10 rounds? There's no data. There's no studies. If anything, the study says that like someone who is responding to a threat having more ammo is a good thing. Nobody ever was in a gunfight and said, dang, I had too much ammo. I just had too much ammo. Like, no, it doesn't happen. So I completely, talking about the magazine ban, I think that the magazine ban, gun magazine bans in general are ridiculous. Round counts, all that stuff. I think the average person carries average magazines. If you carry an AR-15 for your home for self-defense, I think a 30-round magazine is pretty much standard and normal. I'm sure people have 40-round magazines. But, I mean, getting higher numbers than that, you're running the risk of malfunctions. Yeah. And you don't ever want to have that if it's a true life or death situation. So, Glock carries 15 rounds. Psh, shit, I think that's awesome. Yeah. I think it should carry 17 rounds. You know what I mean? If you could realistically, right, and keep it concealed. So
for recreation, the other stuff is fun.
Yeah, for recreation,
for actual use.
Yeah,
and to play devil's advocate, if you're not, let's say you're in the middle in terms of politics, and you're not a gun owner, you don't understand guns. You're quite frankly, there's a number of people out there who are just afraid of guns overall. There's no way they can really understand what we're talking about. So when they hear like 30 round magazine, why do you need that many? Like why do you need that? It's I get why they don't understand it, but it's also one of those. I think we've got to do a more effective job of. I think a lot of gun owners, their first instinct is kind of the fuck you instinct.
The defensive instinct,
like, hey,
which is...
That's right, I got a 150 round mag.
Let it roar. Yeah.
Let it rip, let's rub it in.
Yeah.
But I think we got to do a better job of communicating with the public the necessity for those things. And even if it is just recreation. Because people are afraid that those will get into the wrong hands, right?
Fair enough, yeah.
Be it, somebody in your household who's a little off, who might have access to your weapon.
Yeah.
Be it somebody who's never committed a crime before, like the Orlando shooter.
Yeah. Just a lunatic.
He's able to buy a firearm.
Yeah.
And it's really a sad thing. I've had people tell me, hey, I don't care about magazine capacity. I would fucking do away with all that shit to not see another kid die. Or if it's one less kid. And I'm like, I don't know that it would be one less.
Yeah, the thing is, this is like, it's like, oh, we're going to get back to like a political thing, but like the Democrats will say, it doesn't have to be Democrats, sometimes liberals, whatever. They'll say, if it just saves one child, isn't it worth it? Well, listen, I mean, why don't we ban pools? Because kids drown in pools at a rate of 5,000 per year in their backyard and public pools and their neighbors' pools, wherever it is, they drown. So do we sit there and say, no more pools? No, nobody says that. No, you know what I mean? There has to be a balance between like
vehicles is the other one, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Vehicles, but I mean, of course, people say, well, banning pools and vehicles is ridiculous. The quote out there is what guns kill like 30,000 people a year. Maybe
it's such a, but let me say, it's a very skewed number because they say it's 35,000, just a number. Half of them, more than half, are suicide. Yes. So I don't consider those gun deaths. I mean, yes, they used a weapon, but at the same time, they could drink bleach. Okay, like I mean.
Yeah. Right. There's a lot of ways to kill. And what's also in that number are police officer shootings.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No,
so
absolutely.
Now you're getting down to a number that's really, starts to get a lot smaller. And I think the more information that we have through the internet and other sources now, people can get more educated on these issues more easily. I think a lot of activist organizations used to be able to throw out numbers like that and really kind of scare people.
Yeah.
But when you start peeling away the layers of the onion,
exactly,
the numbers get real. And why can't we just be honest about the numbers? Let's be honest about the numbers.
Because there's an agenda.
Right.
That's the thing we talked about in the beginning.
They're not out to prove a point. They're just out to do good things.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we talked about in the beginning, is this agenda, and it's like, that's why we say that the line's drawn in the sand with the NRA, and we feel like, people don't want to come for our guns. Well, there is even if it's not even spoken, there's an underlying agenda. Look at Every Town for Gun Safety is run by Michael Bloomberg, literally one of the biggest gun grabbers in the United States.
Right.
Would take them all away if he could.
Except for his security
team, which is 10 people with,
probably armed
to the teeth. Yeah. It's so hypocritical. But getting back, I lost my train of thought now.
That's okay.
But getting back to the magazines and stuff, and What were we talking about?
Magazine capacity.
Magazine capacity. I don't think there should be any limits on it. I think that there's, if you can realistically carry and conceal 100 rounds, do it. I don't know. I think you're kind of strange for doing it, but I mean, at the same time, I don't think there should be a limit. It says, 5 rounds. That doesn't stop any criminal. No criminal says, oh yeah, that 5-round magazine ban. I should probably, scale back a few of these because,
And I tell people all the time, man, like I would much rather deal with an active shooter than a bomb.
Oh yeah, a bomb.
A truck loaded with a bomb.
That's scary.
Place. So you start restricting guns, and more people are going to find other ways to blow people up.
Right.
Whether it's on their person, whether you have a group of 5.
Yeah.
I use the term terrorist, but I'm not caught up in I think everybody who does this stuff is a terrorist, whether they're from this country or not.
Agreed.
So that's my blanket. When I say terrorist, I mean everybody, not just somebody from another country who wants to do harm to our country.
I want to get back to one thing.
5 people, yeah, no problem. 5 people strapping bombs to their chest. Good luck dealing with that.
Yeah. There's and you know what the funny thing? And I say the fight. It's not funny at all. Actually, is look at Nice, France this summer. A guy drives a truck 80 miles an hour, whatever it was, through a crowd of people and kills 80-something people. I mean, we've never had any mass shooting that's ever been that bad. And that was just one truck with one guy. I think he had a gun. He was shooting people along the way, but just how much destruction and damage you can do if you're really set on doing it, and making these restrictions to people who want to carry 15 rounds. It's asinine, really.
France is like very liberal with their gun policy, right?
Yeah, very liberal, very liberal. No, they look at Americans and they look at us like we're completely nuts.
They think we're crazy.
Yeah.
But by the way, I believe one politician did blame us for the shooting that they had there.
Of course.
A year earlier?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like our guns or something.
Right. Yeah, our guns are flowing over there. Some ridiculous thing like that.
Yeah, it's our fault.
I was on a cruise. I'll tell a story really quick. I was on a cruise this about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was with some buddies from home, and met these girls. They were like babes, are really hot, and like we were all at the dinner table, and this girl goes to me. She's from Canada, and she's like, I really like Florida, and I really like America, but I don't understand your gun laws. And she's like, there's just so many guns. I was like, well, there's a lot to it. It's not as simple of like, oh, we have too many guns. I was like, there's a lot to it. It's a freedom that we have, but more importantly, it's a freedom. We can defend ourselves. And she's like, but there's so many killings. I was like, I looked at these numbers, and I'm like, I just happened to look at like maybe a week before I got on this cruise. I was like, 35,000 deaths a year, average. Half of them are from suicide, so you can't really count those in deaths. Well, a good portion of the 16,000 that's left are related to drugs and gangs. So these people are involved in gangs and drugs. They're doing illegal stuff. How does that affect me? I mean, like, I'm not involved in gangs and drugs. You know what I mean? So, like, you want to make a law that kills maybe 8,000 people a year in a country full of 330 million? Yeah. I mean, you're talking about such small numbers. And when you look at the numbers, if you're a numbers person, you're like
making a law, you're taking away a right.
That's a right. Exactly.
Our founding fathers, it's kind of annoying when people always quote that, but it's very true.
Yeah.
That, I mean, these people dealt with tyranny at the highest level.
At the highest.
You're absolutely right. And it was a very important, and when people say, well, that was the time of the musket, but that was like the most advanced military weapon of the time. That like blew people away. I mean, that just, like,
exactly.
Firearms, those basic firearms that came in, were what helped wipe out the buffalo population.
Exactly. And those were actually pretty serious. The musket,
Native
like
Americans. That was a serious weapon.
It was a serious weapon, and to make this analogous is like the First Amendment counts towards the right to freedom of speech and religion and so on, and free press and so on. Well, yeah, there was a printing press back in 1796, right? Does that mean that the internet doesn't count as free speech any longer? I mean, right. Do you think the founding fathers never thought that technology would ever increase at some point? Right. These brilliant guys who made this awesome document, I'm sure they thought that the Second Amendment's not just for muskets. So when you get that argument, you're like, okay, does the printing press mean for the First Amendment? Anything outside of that, the internet doesn't count. It's the
right to bear arms,
exactly.
Not the right to bear
muskets
and nothing more advanced.
Exactly. So
arms is very general, folks.
Yeah, I agree, and it's I don't know what it all entails. I mean, does that mean we can have rocket launchers? I don't know. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
I don't know where the line is drawn, I guess, but I think that an automatic rifle, should put restrictions on it. But I also think that it should be legal to have if you go through the red tape.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right. I want a tank.
Yeah. I want a minigun with a helicopter, both of those. But yeah, so you want to wrap I guess we can wrap this up at the end. Yeah, and
thank you for listening to our podcast. If you have any comments or questions, ask below, and don't forget to check out our sponsors.